U2 began when four teenage friends decided to form a rock group, even though they had no songs and could barely play their instruments. All they had was an intense belief in each other. In a very short period, U2 became the biggest band in Ireland, then the biggest band in Europe, then the biggest band in the world. They became everything they'd ever dreamed of by never letting go of their friendship. U2 are legends. This is their story. Bono was born Paul Hewson in Dublin, Ireland in 1960. Before Paul was born, a fortune teller told his mother Iris that she'd have a son whose name would begin with P, and he'd become famous. Iris was a Protestant. Her husband Bobby was Catholic. Paul always felt like an outsider. At St. Patrick's Secondary School, Paul wasn't happy. He often skipped school and would wander the city. In 1972, a new school called Mount Temple opened as the first co-ed, non-denominational high school in Dublin. At Mount Temple, the social and religious divisions of Irish society were left outside. Paul felt at home there immediately. In September of 1974, Iris Hewson died suddenly. Paul would never be the same.
I actually can't remember that much about my own mother, which is odd, I suppose, because I was 14, I think, when she died. She died at my grandfather's funeral, which was bizarre. He was a very cool man. And so I woke up one day and the two of them were gone.
Will you be back tomorrow?
Larry Mullen Jr. was 2 years behind Paul at Mount Temple, but Paul had noticed him in the halls. Larry was a good-looking kid with an air of self-confidence. His mother, Maureen, was loving and attentive and took her kids to music lessons. One day at his music school, he heard someone playing drums. That, Larry told his mother, was what he wanted to do. In the fall of '76, at his father's suggestion, Larry pinned up a notice on the bulletin board at Mount Temple asking if anyone was interested in starting a band. Dave Evans was the first to respond. He and his older brother Dick showed up at Larry's house for the first band meeting with their friend, Adam Clayton.
He looked like a negative of Michael Jackson. He had a blonde afro. From sort of north side Dublin perspective, he looked like he was coming from another planet. And he'd been thrown out of public school, one of the best schools in the country. And I ended up as a punishment in Mount Temple, which was a free school. A progressive school, but a free school. And he looked like he certainly thought he was the coolest guy on the block. And were it not for the blonde afro, he might have been.
Adam talked his parents into getting him a bass guitar. He didn't quite know how to play it yet, but at the first meeting at Larry Mullen's house, he threw around terms like gig, jam, and fret action, and the rest of the boys were suitably impressed.
The first rehearsal took place in my kitchen at home in Dublin, and it was just god awful. I can't tell you. It was bad to start out with, and it didn't get better for a lot of years. You know, I think it's what I quoted. I was in charge for about an hour and a half, and then Bono opened his mouth and it was all over. I was relegated behind the drums, and it's been like that ever since.
Paul arranged for the group to rehearse in a classroom at Mount Temple, and they decided to call themselves Feedback.
I think that name came out really because it was the predominant sound of our rehearsals for probably about 4 months. Just this wailing feedback from the microphone that we used to plug into one of the guitar amps.
I just remember getting a real, just a sense of, this is the most extraordinary sound I've ever heard, and it was still out of time and out of tune. And I thought if it made other people feel half what it's making me feel, then this is the way I want to spend the rest of my life. I mean, I remember feeling very early on strong messianic complex coming on. You know what I mean? Megalomania set in very early on with U2.
They changed the name of the band to The Hype and began rehearsing 3 times a week. About this time, Paul and Dave got new names.
I guess we were probably in feedback or whatever that band was, but maybe the Hype. And that was just part of the culture of like this group of friends, was this giving of nicknames. And most of the time they weren't particularly complimentary. They were an attempt in some ways to nail a certain corner of one's, what you might call, insecurities that you're trying to hide. And so Bono's original nickname was Bono Vox of O'Connell Street, and it got changed at various stages to all sorts of unmentionable versions. And actually my first nickname was, for about 6 months, I was known as Inchicore, which is a district of Dublin. And then The Edge happened. And at the time, it was because of my chin.
The Hype got a couple gigs and started working on their own songs. They were influenced by Bowie, The Jam, Television, and Patti Smith.
I know, man, I just got here. You got me thinking I'm about to leave. Someday, maybe tomorrow. I just don't know, I just don't. I just hope there's no more, no way.
First concert I ever went to was The Clash in Trinity College, and I never seen anything like it, because it was a white riot. It was literally there was a sense that anything could happen. It was confrontational, and I remember barging my way up to the front, to be in the middle of the riot. For whatever reasons, when you're 17, you want to, see what it's like. That was it, and I was in.
In March of '78, Adam was expelled from Mount Temple for streaking across the campus. He began acting as the full-time promoter and manager of the Hype. By the time the Hype had changed their name to U2, Edge's brother Dick had drifted out of the group. U2 would always be Larry, Bono, Adam, and the Edge.